All right, you guys, we are going to go ahead and get started with today's stretch break class. Like I said, we're starting off with that tension piece of equipment just to stretch out the chest. Not necessary, but this can be a broomstick, blanket, or a towel, and it really just has to be something you can hold your hands out like this. Then we're bringing our arms back there to stretch out the chest. If we don't want to use this, there's no problem. We can come up to a wall here, stretching our chest. And you can mix around the angle you have your arm at here. It can be up towards the ceiling at about a 45-degree angle, parallel to the ground, or down at about a 45. And of course, you can even try bending that elbow if that gives you a little bit more comfort throughout that. If you're doing it off on the wall, I'd say hold any one of those specific positions where you feel tension. No need to waste it on an area where you might not feel that much tension, but hold for about 20 to 40 seconds and then switch it on over. So if you're doing your right, switch it on over to left. If you're doing this one, we're kind of on our own here to start us off, just because everybody has their own piece of equipment. So the one thing I recommend that if we're doing this one, if you ever need a break, just bring it on back over, take a little bit of time to relax, and then send it on back. But yeah, guys, that's how we're going to get started here. Just a little bit of time at the start of class dedicated to just opening up that chest. Feel free starting wherever you want. And of course, take sips of water throughout, especially while we're holding these static stretches. And continue to breathe, focusing on relaxing the nervous system, trying to breathe below the diaphragm, expending pretty much at the stomach area, not so much at the chest, breathing right through here. So yeah, guys, wherever you feel that stretch is needed, that's where you're starting out today. And while we're going through this, guys, I want to make you a reminder that while we do have this stretch class scheduled for 15 minutes on Wednesdays, you can, of course, always take time throughout your day, any day of the week, to do a little bit of stretching. And not even a full body stretch, maybe just focusing on a few specific areas. All the areas that we tend to hit today are areas that tend to get tight and a little bit out of balance due to us sitting for a long period of time. So they tend to be good ones to replicate outside. But if you ever feel a specific stretch, maybe in your hip flexors or in your hamstrings, go ahead, focus on those. One thing I always do recommend, though, is if you're feeling tightness in your hamstrings, it's definitely okay to stretch those hamstrings, but do make sure you're stretching a little bit in the front as well. And that's just because sometimes, not always, but sometimes those muscles in one area can pull taut the muscles on their opposite end, those antagonist muscles. So in this case, the quads and or hip flexors might make your glutes and hamstrings a little bit tighter. So if you're going to stretch one, especially if the problem comes back right away, let's say you stretch your hamstrings, then all of a sudden they're tight a little bit later, it might actually be something up here. If that's ever a question for you guys, feel free to reach out to us. We always like to guide you guys through those, but you definitely don't want an imbalance just because these muscles, one side is a little too tight, but you keep lengthening the wrong side. So if you feel like stretching those hamstrings, stretch the front here as well, just as a precautionary measure. All right, guys, from there, we're going to step away from those chest stretches. And here we're just going to hinge down at the hips, focusing on a nice hamstring stretch here. You can feel free to touch the toes or the ground, but if you want a little bit of a less focus on that and really just to focus on those hamstrings, feel free to cross those arms over. And if you feel your spine elongating here, that's okay as well. Flexing a little bit forward. It's just the thing I want you to do is if you come out of this stretch, trace your hands up your shins towards your knee to extend that spine before you hinge up at the hips. And just like that chest stretch, guys, we're going to hold this one a little bit longer, kind of on your own time. So feel free to take it in as you need it. And I'll check back in just a little bit. And right there, guys, I'm gonna have you put your hands on your shins, track those hands up towards the knees as you extend the spine. Feel free to extend at the hips. And from there, we're gonna go down into a nice lunge position. We're gonna focus on the opposite muscles, those hip flexors and those quads. So we're gonna be, again, in this lunge position, neutral pelvis, torso upright. And we're gonna try pushing forward a little bit there to get a nice stretch in this area, those hip flexors, and it may radiate down to the quads a little bit. That's okay. If you need a little bit more of this, I recommend rotating into this top knee. If that doesn't quite work, try leaning into that top knee as an if or as an and or an or. So you can try both of those together or one or the other. If that one doesn't work, you have that option. Again, try both of those first. But if you need to lean back a little bit, that's okay too. The only reason I recommend a little bit of caution there is because that hip flexor crosses over that pelvic bone. We want to avoid any excess irritation. So make sure that we can be in a position that's comfortable enough for you to hold that for a little bit of time. From there, guys, we're going to take the hip flexor at another angle. We're going to do a nice Spider-Man stretch here. And right there, guys, we're going to go ahead, switch on over. We're going to do the same thing on that opposite leg. Again, starting in that neutral lunge and then doing some alterations from there. Right there, guys, we're going to go ahead into that Spider-Man lunge or Spider-Man stretch for the hip flexor. And I'll have you guys come out of that. We're going to go on down to the mat, spreading those legs, nice V stretch right down. From there, guys, I'm going to have you bring it on in. Similar stretch, just a different method of attack. We're going to go into a butterfly stretch here. And from there, guys, we're going to go back into that V stretch, trying to start a little bit farther than you started in the previous set. And if you can't, that's okay. But sometimes if we can see that initial adaptation, we want to take advantage of it. But only if it's there, let's not force it. And guys, go ahead, come on out of that one. We're gonna have one leg out in front, we're going to focus on those hamstrings while seated now. Feel free to grab the toes, but if that gives you a little bit too much focus and you rather, or something improper to focus on, we don't want too much strain in the hamstring. So if we're really focusing as a goal on that, I recommend having those hands down here so we can really focus more on the stretch and not so much the we need to touch our toes mantra. Basically, again, we're trying not to overstress the muscle, just trying to give it enough tension that we don't have to freak it out too much. And right there, guys, we're going to go ahead, switch it on over. Same thing. Right there, guys, we're going to go ahead, come out of that stretch. We're going to bring it on down to the mat. Line here on our backs, you guys. We're going to do a little bit of a glute stretch that not only targets the large glutes, but also a small muscle here right off the hip, that piriformis muscle that tends to get tight throughout the day. So what we do here, guys, is we put one ankle on that opposite knee, and then we pull in that bottom knee. And while we're doing that, guys, let's give ourselves some nice ankle rotations over there, both clockwise and counterclockwise. The reason we do that is just to stimulate some blood flow from that ankle back up to the heart. Those ankles and those legs, they tend to, or those feet tend to get really left out of the conversation when we talk about exercise. And with us sitting all day or those areas being stationary, it's really easy for the blood to pool back there. So while we're in this position, great time to focus on that, to try to see if we can't get some blood flow going back into the heart by contracting those muscles down there. And right there, guys, I'm going to have you switch over, do the same thing on the other side. And right there, guys, we're going to go ahead, sit on up. We're going to finish off, as we always do, with our favorite stretch, that four-way neck stretch to get some blood flow back up to the brain. So if you would tuck your chin into your chest for me, stretch the back of the neck. That's a great place for us to start. From there, guys, we're going to go ahead, raise the head back up, tilting back now, chin to the ceiling, eyes to the sky, stretching the front of our necks. And right there, guys, coming back down, one ear, same side shoulder, stretching the sides of our necks. And raising up, same thing, other side.